Welcome to Smashhead here, where we explore the topics we need today in order to create the future of tomorrow. Today's topic is hyperinflation. My last video was on inflation, and although I did touch on hyperinflation there, I think the current fears about it warrants an exploration of this subject so that you too can better appreciate the type of situation economies around the world are currently facing. In today's video, we're going to explore what hyperinflation is, how it works, and then we'll take a look at some real-life examples to help demonstrate just how completely helpless everyone is in the face of its destructive cycle. Inflation is a big subject, and if you have no idea what it is or how it works, I strongly suggest you watch my video on that first. It'll help you understand this one better. You can find it in the description below. Otherwise, as a quick recap, inflation measures the rate at which a given currency loses purchasing power over time. A healthy, stable economy aims for a 2 to 3% inflation rate year over year. Essentially, inflation means that the price of goods and services rises, usually due to an increase of money into an economy, thereby eroding the existing money's value, which means that your money is worth less today than it was just a few years ago. Now, hyperinflation is like inflation turning into the Hulk and smashing away your life savings, investments, and retirement plans into oblivion. Where a healthy inflation rate is aimed to be about 2% year over year, hyperinflation is widely agreed to represent a situation where the inflation rate rises by 50% or more per month. Per month. I mean, just think about that for a sec. Take this pencil, for example. Say it costs $1 this month. At 50% inflation rate month over month, next month, this pencil will be $1.50. $3.37 4 months in. After a full year, this $1 pencil will cost you roughly $85.85. Some expensive letters to grandma. If it sounds extreme and unlikely to you, well, on the one hand, you're right. Hyperinflation is a pretty rare occurrence, but it is not impossible. As we'll see, situations far worse than this one have happened in history, and some of them have happened far more recently than you may be aware of. So how does an economy go from being healthy and stable to going supernova and leaving behind a big, hungry black hole? Well, historically, hyperinflation has occurred and theoretically could still occur due to things like war, social political situations, turmoil in production issues, and the one that most people worry about, especially lately, an excess supply of money introduced into an economy. It typically follows a pattern where as the price of goods rises and the value of money falls, people begin hoarding the goods that they need, thereby placing a much higher demand on those goods and, you guessed it, raising prices. In addition to hoarding, hyperinflation causes people to minimize their holdings of the affected currency, meaning that if the money in your country just jumped out of an airplane, you're going to want to try to grab onto as much value as you can by trading that currency for something more stable like the US dollar or the euro or a combination of both along with gold and silver. I think we can all guess how well it goes for people in that situation. The bottom line here is that hyperinflation in real, tangible terms is just a massive panic. Everybody freaks out, they grab on to what's real and try to hang on while simultaneously ridding themselves of what has now become essentially play money. Okay, so hyperinflation is this runaway effect that essentially destroys entire countries, but how do you stop it? Well, most of the time, you don't. And the aftermath is a period of extreme hardship where even the most basic goods and services are not available to anyone for any price. It's a bad time. It's so bad, in fact, that I think it's important that we take a look at actual examples of hyperinflation so that we can see what's involved and what kind of damage it causes to an economy and the population of a country. Greece was invaded by German and Italian troops during World War II, and they forced the country to pay for their soldiers while they occupied their country. Foreign trade was halted, businesses went bankrupt, income disappeared, and the Greek government resorted to printing as much money as needed in order to pay for the bills incurred by the war. This specifically is what caused a month-over-month inflation rate to skyrocket to 13,800%. Which it means the price of things doubled roughly every 4 days. This cup of coffee is $1 today, $2 on Thursday, and $4 next Monday. The end of World War I saw Germany's opponents impose nearly impossible reparation payments on the country in retaliation for the war. In plain English, countries like the US, the UK, and France forced Germany to pay for the war. By this point, Germany's economy was already destroyed from fighting the war. As a result of the Treaty of Versailles, the German government was forced to liquidate their currency in exchange for more stable currency with which they could make reparation payments. This led to a very, very brutal time in German history where money was essentially worthless and the price of goods doubled every 3.5 days or so. This situation, of course, eventually backfired on Germany's opponents as it led directly to the rise of a man with a very powerful message for the poor and starving and unemployed people of Germany. The failure of the Soviet Union sent Yugoslavia into an economic tailspin unlike many others. The country itself fell apart due to socio-political issues and devolved into war as various factions were trying to establish independence for their own governments and refusing to deal with each other economically. Naturally, Western powers got involved and made everything better. No, they got involved and they made everything worse by putting economic sanctions on Yugoslavia. The country ended up overspending, overborrowing, and overprinting money until the month-over-month inflation rate reached an astounding 313 million%. Which means the price of things doubled roughly every 54 hours. That's just over 2 days. Out of all the examples we've seen today, this one is, in my opinion, by far the most interesting. That's because the cause of the hyperinflation in this case isn't due to external factors like war or social political issues or even a natural catastrophe. In this case, the cause is 100% governmental mismanagement. This is Robert Mugabe. He was the very controversial leader of Zimbabwe from 1980 all the way up until 2017. In the 1990s, his government began taking land away from ethnically European landowners and giving that land away to Zimbabweans. However, the people who lost those lands were the people who were experienced enough to make those lands produce food for the country. Their removal resulted in a plunging supply of food in the face of an ever-increasing demand, thereby raising prices. As a result, the government borrowed heavily in an effort to sustain their faltering economy. But as hyperinflation began to take hold of the country in 2006, the government printed 21 trillion Zimbabwe dollars to try and pay off some of that debt. Then it printed $60 trillion later that year just to basically make payroll. By 2007, there was a massive shortage of basic supplies, and the government even imposed a 6-month-long wage freeze. By 2008, $50 million bills, which were printed, were worth approximately $1.20 American. All in all, the month-over-month inflation rate hit an astounding 79 billion%, which means the price of goods doubled every 24 hours, every day, every single day. Price of everything doubled. This resulted in the government issuing bills that said $50 million, then $100 million, $200 million. At one point, they even imposed a limit on how much money people could withdraw from the bank. They put this limit at 500,000 Zimbabwean dollars, which was equivalent to about 25 cents American. At its peak, a loaf of bread, just humble, simple bread we make sandwiches with, cost upwards of $35 million. $35 million. for bread. Ultimately, the US dollar was adopted as legal tender, and eventually the government just re-evaluated their money, pegging its value to that of the American dollar. The purpose of this video is to highlight the difference between inflation and hyperinflation, because if you only listen to the headlines out there, you might not see much of a difference. Though there are similarities, hyperinflation is an extreme example of inflation, and it's one that leaves just pain and misery and destruction in its wake. It's also important to realize that although hyperinflation is an extreme example and its occurrence is fairly rare, there is no government or country in the world which is immune from its threats, no matter how prepared they may tell you they are. You can't yell at the hurricane to get back over the ocean. I mean, you can, but it would be as ridiculous as trying to stop some of the hyperinflation examples we've looked at today. So that's it. That is the exciting world of hyperinflation, how it works, and why you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of it, but you shouldn't just brush it off either. It's a serious thing, and it happens fairly quickly. So if you like this video, make sure you let YouTube know by hitting the like button, and if you want to see more of these videos in the future, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You're right there. And with that, thank you for your time.